Desperate times call for desperate measures, so I've hot-footed it back from Washington, D.C. Yes, it's Never Mind the Ballots, and I am Harry Cole. When we launched this show in 2024, I never thought its title would be so appropriate. And what I've stumbled into today, jet-lagged and bleary-eyed, is the most crackers political saga in recent memory. Welcome to the Westminster zombie apocalypse. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the walking dead man of Downing Street, is clinging onto power by his fingertips. His MPs are in revolt, yet his spineless cabinet are refusing to publicly decapitate the zombie premier. And the country, well, we look on with wide-eyed bafflement and sheer exhaustion at how a Labour government that landed such a huge mandate just 2 years ago has failed so catastrophically by every single metric. The political undead got a pasting at the polls last week. Yet Starmer, he refuses to admit that he was the primary reason for Labour's collapse. Literally, he's the one saying never mind the ballots now. Yet another howl of rage. It thundered from voters in the Brexit heartlands of Britain yet again last week. And what's Starmer's answer? More Europe, back to free movement. And if you disagree, you're backing the bigots. But last week's local election results were not your usual political wear and tear. It was a fiasco, a train wreck, the mother of all bin fires. Zombie Starmer's delusional mantra at the cabinet this morning that the country wants him to get on with the business of government as usual is beyond comical. Never mind the men in grey suits. It's time to send for the men in white coats tonight. The facts are plain. Starmer promised competence, he promised an economic recovery, and he promised discipline around the nation's finances. What have we got instead, though? A government with no plan, blasting a fire hose of cash into an already bloated public sector and welfare system. Just look at the stats. 8.3 million people are now on universal credit. That's up an astonishing 830,000 in just a single year. A single year since Starmer bottled welfare reform. Half of those claimants, 4.2 million, have absolutely no requirement to seek work. That is not sustainable. And when you add on to that the soaring borrowing costs we have, they dwarf what we spend on defence, and a health system that's unreformable and continues to drain billions of pounds every week. What happened to all those bold promises to fix these woes? Instead, there's been how many U-turns? 20 by my count. We need to check that, but it's about 20. Half-assed policies written on the back of an old fag packet and okay to go by who? God knows who. And then it becomes government by WhatsApp group. Newbie MPs too afraid to make any difficult choice. And a PM incapable of taking his party with him, let alone the country. These are not serious people. And here's the thing, Westminster still doesn't get it. People are tired. They're tired of the drift, they're tired of the excuses, and they're tired of governments, frankly, of every stripe, promising competence, yet delivering confusion. We've had the thick end of 2 decades of institutional chaos, managed decline, and political short-termism. And voters said something very, very clear last week. Enough. Enough is enough. So why can't the Prime Minister, in fact, why doesn't his entire government just take the bloody hint? Joining us live from Downing Street, it's the political editor of The Sun, Jack Elsom. Jack, I mean, what the hell is going on? I thought Boris Johnson's downfall was, a sort of comic tragedy played out over days of drifting power. This is making it look like, a model of competence, a perfect putsch.
Well, Harry, if you thought things couldn't get any more bonkers, I regret to inform you that just a few moments ago behind me, Chuka Umunna just walked down Downing Street and into the black door of number 10, that Romaniac ex-Labour MP who ended up crossing the floor to the Liberal Democrats, setting up his new pro-Remain party. Whether or not he's going in for a job.
Well, presumably, what's he going to be? The new Home Secretary, the new Chancellor? Maybe he could be our new envoy.
Well, I think they take anyone at this point because clearly it's crisis time in Downing Street. I mean, this street right now is absolutely chock-a-blocked with journalists, which is never a good sign for the Prime Minister inside. At the moment, he seems to be digging in. And we had the sight earlier on of a pretty surreal cabinet meeting in which Keir Starmer at the top addressed his top team and said that he was not going anywhere. There was no immediate leadership challenge, and therefore he was going to carry on as before. He then decided to go into all talking about the government issues of the day. He was talking about the Middle East. He was talking about tomorrow's King's speech. People in that room have told me that it was one of the weirdest things they've ever seen, where you had the entire Starmer premiership imploding around him, but he has this laser-like ability to compartmentalise and just to sort of keep ploughing on. Amongst all this, we now have about 100 MPs who have called for him to go. We have a drip of ministers, including Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, saying that he needs to resign. It does feel that at the moment, what this is going to take is either a cabinet minister or one of the leadership rivals to call time on Keir Starmer's premiership for him to finally, I think, get the message that he needs to go. But at the moment, they've all gone to ground. You know, Wes Streeting stormed out of the cabinet meeting behind me a few hours ago without saying a word to the media. Shaban Mahmood, who we know is very sceptical about Keir Starmer's ability to survive this, has gone down to the bunker. Andy Burnham's got his train to Euston. He's in London, clearly hoping to pick up the pieces of an imploded Starmer premiership. Angela Rayner said her piece a few days ago, but has been quiet ever since. It's going to take one of them, I think, to wield the knife. And that, I think, will precipitate the end of Keir Starmer. But at the moment, they don't seem very reluctant to do so.
I mean, it's remarkable that there is so many people that, you know, as you say, a quarter of the Labour MPs have now broken cover and gone over the top to say that he needs to go in some form or the other. But even amongst themselves, they can't decide whether that's a quick contest to shut out Andy Burnham or go long to allow the so-called King of the North, as he likes to be known, find a seat, find a scramble. He's saying, "Oh, I've got a seat lined up, I could do it." Does he really, or is it just bluster?
It seems to be that the mood music is that they're coalescing around a long timetable. Keir Starmer would want that if he was to resign. You'd almost certainly want his swan song, his summer of legacy building, potentially jetting around the country and ending in time for conference. Wes Streeting's allies are clearly pushing for that rapid contest as they see it in order to close the window on the period where Andy Burnham can get that seat and ride in. The issue is going to be that if that does happen, Andy Burnham doesn't get allowed in to that leadership contest, and he will always be there. He will always be, to some Labour MPs, the prince over the water. If Wes Streeting gets in, if Angela Rayner gets in, he will always be seen as a stitch-up because they didn't manage to take on Andy Burnham. But you know, this is all very hypothetical at the moment because Keir Starmer is still squatting in Downing Street, despite the fact, like you said, about a quarter of his MPs are now calling for him to resign. And so, you know, I think for the plotters at the moment, their first step, more than anything, is turfing out Keir Starmer out of number 10. Although I have to say, the number 10 rearguard operation, which was pretty woeful yesterday, where you saw only a smattering of the loyalist of loyal cabinet ministers and ministers come out to defend their boss. Today, we're getting more of a sense of the wagon circling. We are seeing a coordinated letter, about 100 MPs now, which have signed to say that the Prime Minister should stay in his post. And they are the point they are making to me, number 10 sources, is that just imagine the scenario in which the Prime Minister resigns. Just think about the emotional response that would trigger from lots of the party who don't want him to go. Just like the Tories, they would end up tearing themselves apart for years. It's very hard to, getting rid of a leader with a mandate, that's the hard part. Once that's gone, are you ever leader without a mandate? They could drop like flies, and then you could see just years and years of turmoil.
We've seen this movie before, though, Jack. This is exactly what happened to Boris Johnson. He wins a massive mandate from the country. He's knifed by a load of newbie MPs who, frankly, panic about saving their seats. I mean, this is playing out in an almost identical fashion. There's a sort of weird poetry to this, given that Keir Starmer was the chief prosecutor of birthday cake gate, or whatever we call it, Partygate, and yet he's now being literally forced out in a completely similar fashion. Surely they would have learned the lessons from that.
You're right, it is totally poetic, and that's why when you bump into Conservatives, what's left of them around the House of Commons, they are licking their lips at this mouth-watering prospect. The man who did more than anybody else to twist the knife into Boris Johnson and gleefully call for him to step down when there was that cascade of ministerial resignations from his government. The fact that that is now coming back to bite him is a delicious prospect for many Conservative MPs. Although, listen, they're a sideshow in all of this, but you do make a serious point, which is that Keir Starmer was first out of the blocks when that drip started in Boris Johnson's government. It then turned into a flash flood which washed him away. It was Keir Starmer who said, this is not the stability that this country needs. It is chaos. And he came to the electorate in July 24 with one word in his manifesto, which was change. And most of the public saw that from a change for the infighting, the factionalism, the chaos, which dogged the last years of the Tory government. What we are seeing now, really, is that Tory government on steroids in the form of Labour. But the point which Downing Street are making, even still now, despite the fact their government is mired in chaos and confusion, is that if you get rid of Keir Starmer and appoint someone without a mandate, then you ain't seen nothing yet.
This drags on and rolls on, and then we get Liz Truss, and then we get Rishi Sunak, and then they lose election, as we've seen. The other parallel I kind of drawing on, Jack, is, you know, if a prime minister really doesn't want to go, and a Labour leader doesn't really want to go, I mean, how many times did Theresa May resign before she actually finally went out the door? And you talk about legacy, but a summer of legacy building. Let's not forget it was net zero that was Theresa May's legacy, which she rammed through the House of Commons without, barely 90 minutes of debate to get her a legacy off the shelf. So there's a similarity there of perhaps, that's kind of how he will go. But Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, post-Brexit, what was it, 150 resignations from his front bench? And he went, whatever, carried on. So there is a path for Starmer. I mean, he looks delally, but, there is, if he really wants to bed in, what can they do?
Well, any leadership candidate needs to come over the top with those 81 MPs it will take to trigger that leadership contest and get their names on the ballot, at which point I think it will be very unlikely that Keir Starmer survives a vote of the party members. Whether or not he even decides to put his name forward, at that point he'd be battered, he'd be bruised, he'd be emotionally exhausted, and he'd probably know that he wouldn't win that leadership fight. He's clearly saying at the moment that he would fight any leadership challenge, although, as Trevor knows, you have to say that right up until the point where you're actually willing to chuck in the towel. Otherwise, you're just a total busted flush. And so, he would almost certainly probably lose that grassroots vote. Lots of the members are terribly unhappy with the Starmer premiership. They see it bizarrely as not being left-wing enough, not being close to Europe enough. And that is why in the speech...
What are these people smoking?
What you have to remember is that the Labour Party membership really don't care about power as much as other parties. They just care about getting their factionalist leader into post, and basically hostile takeovers is the watchword rather than actually a sensible campaign in government. And so you could imagine a scenario in which Keir Starmer puts himself forward, gets absolutely trounced by either Andy Burnham or Angela Rayner, and then loses that. Would he want to go through that? I'm not so sure. But you're right, at the moment, until any leadership rival is willing to come over the top, wield the knife themselves, he can just squat in number 10 for as long as he likes. And listen, people like Wes Streeting, you speak to people in their camp, he is very loath to bloody his hands and be cast as some sort of traitor in this fight. He has been told, and there's an old adage that goes through Westminster, isn't there, that he who wields the knife never wears the crown. But you know what? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, or unless you're Margaret Thatcher against Ted Heath, which is something that Trevor might remember, in which he actually managed to, she become Labour leader exactly by doing that. And so, whether Wes Streeting decides to grasp the nettle at this point of maximum vulnerability to the Prime Minister, that is up to him.
We did try to see the Prime Minister today, we understand. So the Prime Minister opened Cabinet and said, we're going to have a Cabinet meeting, but this is not the time to talk about leadership. If you want to talk about leadership, come and see me. But then he refused to see Wes afterwards. I mean, is that what happened?
Yes, that's what sources are telling me anyway. Quite a bizarre moment where he came out of the cabinet room having basically ignored this huge elephant in the room for the entire 90-minute session. He then comes out and Wes Streeting, we understand it, hovers outside and tries to make advances to see the Prime Minister, but was pretty unceremoniously rebuffed. Now, Wes Streeting, never usually one to be shy to the cameras and the awaiting media.
I don't know, whatever could you mean?
Stormed out of number 10. It didn't look the happiest and just marched straight past them, where other cabinet ministers had stopped to talk to the broadcast crews assembled there. And so, for someone like Wes Streeting to walk out like that, he clearly felt pretty snubbed. And I have to say, their camp has gone pretty dark this afternoon. So you can imagine the sort of the plots and the machinations which are going on in the health department right now.
Not just the health department, Jack. Final question. Let's put you, where are we? Tuesday afternoon. Will we see cabinet resignations in the coming 24 hours, do you think?
If I was a betting man, I'd say almost certainly yes.
All right, if you're a betting man, who's it going to be?
I think Shabana Mahmood has gone suspiciously quiet. We know she's got scepticisms about Keir Starmer's ability to continue. I think she would be the one to go over the top first.
All right, you heard it here first. Jack Elson, stay there. Sounds like it's going to be a busy night. I hope you got some snacks and an umbrella. It looks like you're going to be there for a little while yet. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, Harry.
Right, well, let's put that into some context with the ideological, political godfather of the Sun newspaper, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, the King of England, is arriving in Parliament on Wednesday, tomorrow, to open the state opening Parliament, to read a speech written by Downing Street that will set out the King's government, his government's political agenda for the next 12 months. We don't even know who's going to be in charge in the next 12 days, possibly the next 12 hours. That's an appalling position for a government to put the monarch in, isn't it?
You have to feel sorry for King Charles here, because he's going to have to sit there on the throne with this great 13-pound weight on his head, the crown, pontificating about my government. My phantom government is what he wanted.
The zombie government. Yeah.
My zombie government. He's going to lay out the legislation that is going to allegedly change Britain. That Keir Starmer this is the legacy of Keir Starmer, basically what he's reading out. Because when Starmer goes, which he will do, and I would predict that the writing is on the wall before this weekend, one way or another.
He will signal his future intentions in some way.
I think that Wes Streeting will strike. And I think that he will get the numbers, and he has to do it. He's got no choice. I mean, Jack made the very good point that he has to follow the example, not of David Miliband, who faltered at the last moment, but Margaret Thatcher, who stabbed the knife into Ted Heath and went on to glory. He knows that, and he knows that if he leaves it any longer, Andy Burnham could win a seat, although I don't think that's certain at all. And then he's got a long wait before he gets his chance to put his case forward. The big risk is that he successfully launches a leadership campaign with his 81 plus supporters. And the only people who can fight him, really, because Angela Rayner's still under this cloud of tax cloud.
Still hasn't settled with HMRC.
Burnham's out of the picture, is Ed Miliband.
Oh, God,
and a few other also rats. And this ties in with the catastrophe that's waiting us all, which is an economic crisis.
Well, yes. We spoke the other day about the fact that, look at the the 25-year bond market is at 10-year bond market is at a 25-year high. This puts Liz Truss's, graph in it dwarfs it. And yet we're just sort of carrying on as if everything's fine. I mean, the bond market couldn't be clearer. They're saying they do not like a shift to left. And every time that it looks like Keir Starmer might survive and Rachel Reeves might survive, the bond market is saying, look, we might not like these people, but it's better than the other lot.
Yes, and you couldn't shift much further to the left economically than Ed Miliband. I think we were heading for a recession way back before Gaza, before Iran. And I think that the budget that Rachel Reeves has brought in, the welfare spending, the borrowing, the mounting debt
and the tax burden.
The tax burden, all of these things are the sort of formula for a recession. Now it's been exacerbated beyond any chance of recall by what's happening here today in Downing Street. And we are really seriously heading for a very major and painful recession for which this government will be blamed.
Mostly the first job of the new incoming new left-wing Labour leader will go cap in hand to the IMF, back to the 70s style. Trevor, where do you put this in the context of you've seen febrile days in Westminster, febrile weeks in Westminster. Obviously, scars on my back go as far back as the Liz Truss fandango that we saw. Obviously, the Boris Johnson saga, COVID, the Brexit wars, where basically all rules kind of went out the window, when you had ministers trading blows literally on the airwaves on a daily basis. But this seems uniquely crackers in the fact, I think that someone once said that Ian Duncan Smith had a mural problem and he can't see what's on the wall. Keir Starmer, is he either really ballsy and just saying, sod it, or is he mental?
I think he's thinking of his legacy. The legacy is either he scuttles off with his tail between his legs and says, this is the programme for my successor, or he fights and makes the others fight him. In other words, he can then subsequently claim
I was
that
not.
I delivered this landslide victory. I delivered this government, the first in many years, and I'm being treated shabbily by a very ungrateful bunch, just as everything was beginning to work.
You could make the case, though. I mean, it took until Jess Phillips this afternoon for, it was the great resignation of the great Who's. I mean, every time there was another MP that said there needs to be a leadership change, or another junior, parliamentary bag carrier saying they're resigning, it was like, who are these people? They kind of owe their careers to Keir Starmer and Morgan McSweeney, who plucked them out of third sectors and charities and low-level lawyers and unions, and made these people politicians, and this is how they repay them.
Well, I mean, Harry, you've been doing the job. You've been watching this party for a long time. Could you name the cabinet all the way through? I couldn't.
I think I could. Gun to the head, I could. There's a couple I might,
Yeah.
I mean, there's ministerial jobs I didn't even know existed today. I mean, this payroll is just out of control.
These aren't just third-raters. These are non-runners. In any previous administration, most of them would be very lucky to get a job as a Minister of State, let alone the head of a major government department. And I think that this is the problem, because they're anonymous. They have no individual sort of character. Nobody knows them in the public. They don't resonate. You haven't got the figures like David Blunkett, who's even now, as a former Labour cabinet minister, is actually resonating when he writes an article. It's thoughtful and it's got punch. The cabinet, I mean, Jess Phillips is the biggest figure in the
I remember, because she's, I mean, you may not agree with her, and she does wind a lot of people up, but at least she's, you kind of know where she's coming from, right?
Yes, even if she does fail to deal with the crime gangs of...
Well, exactly. I mean, the point that she's making today in a resignation letter is that she has been trying to do lots of things, and number 10 is just
sounds very
paralysis.
Yeah.
We're on to what? They're looking like we're going to knife our, the 6th British Prime Minister in as many years. Obviously, the spectre of Brexit sits heavily over British politics still. If you look at the election results last week, look at those names of those towns that are now basically one-party controlled reform areas. These are the Brexit heartlands. It's your Sunderlands, it's your Wigans, it's vast swathes of the north who all voted for Brexit, have now had 3 or 4 opportunities to tell Westminster, get on with it. The Brexit vote, 2019, 2024. How many more times is the country going to have to say, I'm not going to swear too much, what the hell is going on? And then Starmer pops up and says, the answer is more Europe. The answer is free movement for the under-40s. The answer is we need to be in the heart of Europe. Whereas right now in Europe, Chancellor Merz of Germany is saying Europe's a basket case. We've become a world leader in over-regulation and we've screwed our economies. What planet is he on that the answer to last week's election results is to go completely the opposite way?
And at huge expense, because we're not going to be readmitted to the European Union, which will be the manifesto of the next election, if Keir Starmer were to be Prime Minister, and probably even if he's not. What nobody seems to realise is that, or those who want us to get back into the European Union, is just how badly the European Union as such is faring economically.
Yeah.
There are a few exceptions, but by and large, even Germany is
the once
floundering.
mighty industrial powerhouse of Europe that kept
Exactly.
the whole thing, kept the whole show on the road for decades, while Spain and Greece and Italy were on fire.
The only thing we've got in common with Europe now is our huge national debt.
And a penchant for excellent claret. It does. It's almost. I mean, look, I've been watching this from afar, and I think you've got the hindsight of covering politics for many years, and I've got the sort of distance of looking from where I've been sitting in DC for the last year, and it looks like they're doing everything they possibly can to hand the keys to number 10 to Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage is increasingly looking like a dead cert. The question is the majority, which is very, very important.
Yes.
He needs a big majority, otherwise he's going to have to go into coalition with the Tories.
Yeah, which wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world.
I think actually it would be a good thing, because I think he needs some sort of corporate memory of what it's like to actually govern. And that's what the Tories could offer. But also I think that Kemi Badenoch herself is performing much more impressively than anyone was giving her credit for only a year ago. But the big thing is he's got no government, no matter how big their majority, can really do and take on more than 2, maybe 3 big things. The biggest thing he needs to do is to stop the boats. That is a massive task, and it's one which will meet enormous resistance, not from France and Europe who want to get rid of them.
Guardian, the
But-
BBC, the Blob, the judiciary,
Everybody.
the charities. Can you imagine the howl? Imagine the noise it's going to be.
And quite a few thousand militant Muslims, as we've seen over the Gaza issue. We are on the brink of something quite serious here. But that's his major first task. The second thing is to start dealing with the economy and the regulation that's burning the country. These are going to take a lot of political capital and bandwidth. And so you need a party which has experience, so maybe bringing in
Some of the Conservatives, the Robert Jenricks of the world.
But what we desperately need is rigour and the attention to detail that I do worry Nigel Farage maybe lacks.
I mean, he's looking, it's almost a cliche to say, it is not unknown to, Farage is obviously a great frontman and probably the communicator of his generation easily, and a man more responsible for getting us out of the European Union than any other, perhaps even up there with you, Trevor, on leading the charge over many years on that battle. But he does seem to be sort of starting to surround himself with people. He's got Danny Kruger doing the manifesto. Yes. He's brought in this guy called James Orr, an academic who's. It looks like they're bringing in policy brains in a way the Conservatives used to have this sort of great research department and policy department on the side. It does seem that even Nigel now is beginning to realise he can't do this on his own.
No, but the trouble is he's a one-man band. I mean, congenitally, he is not able to share power. And although he's a great publicist, he's a great campaigner, a great PR man, someone in his party very close to him told me the other day that you can be the best salesman in the company, but it doesn't make you a chief executive.
Indeed. So go on, get out your crystal ball. You think that by the end of this week, where are we now, Tuesday, by the end of the week, we're going to be seeing Keir Starmer electing moment, setting out his timetable of departure? How long do you think they'll give him? Till September?
It depends what happens. I think what is going to happen is that Streeting is going to have to make up his mind.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be the nearly man of Labour politics.
He cannot wait. He needs to act now or lose the moment. He will worry about being the hand that wields the knife, etc., the old saying. But that isn't always a failure. I mean, you need to be bold on occasions. Yeah. So I would suspect that he will do something between now and the weekend. Let's get the King's speech out of the way.
Yeah.
And then they will move.
The zombie king speech.
And then they will move. As someone famous once said, when the herd moves, it moves.
It does. I mean, it does. As we were saying with Jack, and we were touched on earlier, the herd it seems to be twitching rather than moving now. I mean, it's not if you look through the list of who it is that actually is going for it, it's the same old 30-old trots, right, in the socialist campaign group. The hard left, they've always hated Starmer. They'll never forgive him for kicking out Jeremy Corbyn, all of that. Then you've got a sort of centrist rump that's much smaller of people who are clearly Wes people. And then you've got the sort of the panicans, as Donald Trump might call them, the people that are just worried about their tiny majorities and don't want to lose their seats to Reform and have seen Reform in their backyard and have gone over the top. The party deep state, the loyalists, the payroll, they seem pretty firm right now.
Maybe. I think that Wes Streeting is going to do it, and the one big problem he's got is that he's a Blairite.
Yeah.
And Blairites are not the most favourite.
No, I mean, they're exactly.
So, look, he's going to face immediate antagonism within his own party. So all the things that are just about brought Starmer down are going to manifest themselves in different ways against whoever takes over.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the King of the North is a pretender. I'm not sure that after 2 failed attempts to lead the party, that a third is going to make it any more successful. This is going to
be his Culloden for pretenders.
Whoever takes over, whether it's Angela Rayner,
God help us.
Ed Miliband, I think actually Miliband might hold the party together, but he'll
he
will destroy the country.
And I will be on the first plane back.
And I'll go to Australia, so we're all
out of this one. I mean, the country have already. I mean, just finally on Miliband, we can't. He is a sort of elephant in the room. The country comprehensively said no, thank you to him. Once again, it's this arrogance of the Labour Party. It's that they know better. We know better than you. Stupid voters in 2015. You got that wrong. You should have picked Ed Miliband, and now we're going to thrust him upon you without even a general election. I mean, the country would be up in arms.
You only need to look at 2 things about Ed Miliband. First of all, his obsession with net zero at the
Yeah.
expense of the economy.
I'd say it goes further than obsession. I'd say it's a sort of quasi-religious
Yes.
fundamentalism.
It is a dangerous and destructive obsession. And the way he knifed his own brother in
Well,
the back to win the leadership.
And you know what? I bet that's one thing that people will never forget in a focus group or a poll. Tell me about Ed Miliband?
Yep, but his brother failed to do what Wes Streeting is going to do, which is to wield the knife.
The history is littered with the nearly men of Labour politics, and they're still arguing about who knifed Ramsay MacDonald and co. we've got centuries of this stuff to go. They never forget. Trevor, always fascinating. It's going to be a great week for sort of political blood sports for the country. It's fairly terrifying.
I think we're going to see the first Labour serving Prime Minister, ousted from the job.
Trevor Kavanagh there. Jack Elsom has put his bets on. Trevor Kavanagh has put his bets on. I'm remaining to be seen. I have a feeling Starmer might just cling on somehow by hook or by crook. But you won't miss a moment of it here. Subscribe to Sun Politics. Never Mind the Ballots. We'll be back tomorrow as Labour drag their chaos on. Don't miss a thing.